Alrighty, so it's another one of these obligatory end of 2015 best movies of 2015 lists. My turn. So before I count down the top 10 movies of 2015, I'm going to throw a couple of honorable mentions that didn't quite make the list. Cop Car, really enjoyed. Mr. Holmes, great movie. Kingsman: The Secret Service, I enjoyed a hell of a lot. Mission Impossible Ghost, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, Ghost Protocol is very good as well. And Bone Tomahawk. So there's 5 movies that didn't quite make my top 10 list, but I'd say are worth checking out, except for Bone Tomahawk. If I would recommend that to very few people, despite how much I enjoyed it, but that's a different story. Alright. So, number 10. Honestly, there's not really a whole lot to say here about this one. I pretty much knew what to expect going in. It's funny, beautiful animation, a lot of heart. It's one of those movies where you just, because it's Pixar and because of the subject matter and because of people's reactions to it, going in, there are very few surprises. And I was okay with that, because what I got was a really solid movie. So yeah, I greatly enjoyed this one. And this movie is one that is right up my alley. It's the sort of film where I had friends who went to go see it before I got a chance to, and they said, yeah, we thought it was funny, but Joe, you will love this movie. And they're more or less right. I'm a big fan of dark humor. I'm a big fan of dry humor. I'm a big fan of British humor. This film is full of dark, dry British humor, and I just found it hilarious. The setup, that's the whole vampires living in a flat together, and they just live their lives. I like that they had a wide variety of vampires, the Nosferatu kind. I love the references, and I just kind of love seeing these actors play off of each other. It's just a very funny movie based on the situations, and the actors and the characters really make it work. So yeah, funny movie. This was one I was honestly pretty surprised to see that it made my top 10 list, even after I'd seen the movie. And part of that is because there isn't really a whole lot in here that sets it apart from other great movies. Looking at my list, most of the other films on this list, I can point out a definitive reason of, oh yeah, this is that movie, or this movie stands out because of this or that reason. But this film is just a competently made movie. But the more I think about it, the less I could find wrong with it, if that makes any sense. Everything works so well. It's just such a solidly made film that it worked for me. It's one of those movies like Master and Commander, where it's competently shot, very competently shot. In fact, I love the kind of the gritty yellow, sickly style that they use for this movie, because it works well for the subject matter about these men kind of adrift at sea. And I like that the whale isn't the main focus of the story. It's kind of it's there, and it has some big parts, and it's pretty spectacular looking, but it's not like an overbearing, we have to make sure this is a Moby Dick story. If I had one complaint about this movie, it would be that I felt like the Herman Melville scenes were a little forced, as if, okay, you were trying to make that Moby Dick connection. But even that I didn't have a very big problem with, because the actors did a really good job with those scenes, and I was invested in them. So it's a very well-made movie that's just right up my alley, and I really don't have anything to complain about it. I know that doesn't sound like a huge glowing recommendation, but what can I say? It's master filmmaking at its finest. I'd probably feel the same about Bridge of Spies if I had a chance to see that movie this year, which unfortunately I did not. And this is another one like What We Do in the Shadows that is just right up my alley. I know this isn't going to make very many other people's top 10 lists, and I'm fine with that. This is For me, this is just a very fun, batshit crazy horror comedy. It's M. Night Shyamalan realizing what his weaknesses are and running with those for the sake of comedy. He's very self-aware of what he's doing here. The characters have those weird quirks that all Shyamalan characters have in a lot of their movies, but as opposed to playing it for serious and as if he's thinking that they're real characters, he's playing it up for creep factor and just these weird, hilarious little moments. Yeah, this is just a movie that it's just such a joy to watch because you don't see movies like this get a big mainstream release all that often. The movie has the same sort of appeal for me as other movies like Cabin in the Woods or Evil Dead 2. It's nowhere near as good as those movies, I'd say, but it's entertaining for the same reasons. It's not afraid to go a little crazy and just have fun with itself, and I admired that. It was funny. It got a few jumps out of me. It's a movie that works for what it's trying to do, and it's just a good time. Is there anything I really need to say about this? You guys have all seen it. Well, here, you know what? Here's what I will say about it, just briefly. Yes, there are many similarities to the plots of the original trilogy, and I was okay with that because the focus of the movie wasn't on those elements. The fact that there's a giant another killer planet thing and we have to go destroy it and everything like that. That's not the focus of the movie. It's more of a backdrop for this more intense, character-driven drama that's happening. So, it worked for me. It was even better a second time around, which I've heard a lot of people say that it's a better movie on the second screening, and that's absolutely true. It's not a perfect movie. I had problems with it, but the pros vastly outweighed the cons in this case. And I enjoy seeing escapist entertainment, especially science fiction on this scale, because we don't see well-made sci-fi, or sci-fi fantasy if you want to get technical because it's Star Wars. But we don't see large-scale epic space adventures like this that often anymore. And when you see someone put a lot of time and effort and love and care into a movie like this, as I can see they did have behind this. J.J. Abrams obviously cared about this movie a lot, with the practical effects that looked awesome, and the characters with their banter going back and forth, and the spaceships and everything. I felt like a little kid again, and it's rare that a movie can do that for me. And so, I thoroughly love this movie. And I can't wait to see it again, a third time. This movie's... It's not a feel-good movie. This is one that I enjoyed more for the themes and the message at the end, which I can't say a whole lot about. It's a very, very dark movie. I'll just say that. So it's another one that I wouldn't recommend for very many people. But I think it's an important movie in a way, especially since it deals with liars and scumbags and really terrible people, and how they view others because of the way that they live. It's a very tense movie. And that was really cool because it's the sort of movie that makes you think afterwards. And you're sitting there in the theater and you're like, well, I didn't see it in theaters, but it's a movie where you're sitting through the end credits and you just want to start talking with somebody about it and say, oh, okay, so because this character did that and all these things come about, and it's hard to describe without giving away the movie, but I really don't want to. So if you're okay with a movie that deals with some very disturbing, dark subject matter, stuff like you'd see in a movie like Gone Girl, but dealt, I'd say, in a much more mature and thoughtful way, as opposed to a cinematic way, I definitely say it's worth checking out. Although it is a very beautiful movie. It's a very unnerving movie. A lot of very dark, dank atmosphere, which works really, really well for what they're going for. So yeah, I think it's a movie that really works as a thought piece, a conversation piece. It's a conversation starter. That's exactly what the movie is. This is one of the most fun times I've had watching a movie this year. This is from the same director that did Rare Exports, and it has Samuel L. Jackson, it has the little Finnish kid from Rare Exports, and it is just a love letter to 80s action films. Glorious, over-the-top action scenes, there's big explosions, they have villains that just shoot people for no reason because they can. It's really a throwback movie in the best possible way, and I've seen some complaints from people saying like, oh, it's too cheesy, it's too corny. That's kind of the whole point of the movie. That is trying to be as hilariously over the top that it can. And I think a lot of people are thrown off because it doesn't play like a comedy. It plays like it's trying to be a serious, straightforward action movie. But for me, that's why it works, is because it's not something like Iron Sky, where it's in-jokey and trying to be a parody of itself. It takes delight in and relishes the stereotypes and the cliches of those crazy action movies from the 80s. But it knows what it's trying to be. I think a movie that does something like that poorly would be, the Expendables movies are fun, but they do, I think, tend to take themselves a little bit more seriously, as those are trying to be 80s action movies, and they work for that. But this movie is trying to emulate the fun you'll have while watching an 80s action movie, and it works. It absolutely worked for me. It's probably, out of all the movies on this list, it's one of the ones I'll end up watching the most in the future. It's the sort of movie where I can just pop on at any minute, no matter how recently I've seen it, and still enjoy it. It's another movie like The Gift that is a very thoughtful movie. I liked the themes it brought up and the way it got my gear wheels turning inside my head after I finished it. For me, it was a movie not about finding humanity in machines, but just what makes someone a rational being altogether. I love that the movie shows kind of two different viewpoints of these robots, where you have one viewpoint that's just kind of like, oh, these are just machines, and we must try to make them as human as possible, and this other viewpoint of, what if they are just as worthwhile as humans, because they might be rational beings. And I don't want to give away the ending, but it gets a lot smarter as the movie goes on. That comes off as kind of sounding kind of pretentious, I just realized, but it's a very interesting movie. It's the sort of movie that it doesn't have a surprise ending, but you kind of go, aha, I see what the movie was getting at there. And again, it has a very dark, dank kind of atmosphere going throughout it, but it's a very stylish movie. It's a movie that uses its budget to really good effect. And yeah, I'd say that it certainly deserves the top spots on a lot of people's lists. Again, it's number 3 on mine. I got another 2 coming up. One of them is Mad Max, or is it? Maybe not. Of course it's Mad Max. I'm a really big Ridley Scott fan when he's at his A game. This is Ridley Scott really working in his wheelhouse. It reminded me a lot of Robinson Crusoe on Mars. And if you think about it, both films are pretty similar in that they try to be somewhat realistic. Robinson Crusoe on Mars eventually goes kind of crazy, but they try to pull some sort of science out of their butts. But The Martian really tries to make you feel that this could actually happen. And from what I understand, a lot of the science is pretty sound behind the movie. But it's played up for drama, of course. it's just really interesting to see a Lost in Space movie that's trying to be realistic and it isn't boring as all hell. Matt Damon kills it in the role, and I'm just disappointed that Sean Bean didn't get to make a Boromir joke, except especially when they set it up for him in one scene. But it's okay, because the movie's great. One of the reasons I find this movie so great isn't just because of how stylish and over the top and crazy it is. It isn't just that they have a female protagonist that isn't sexualized for once. Thank you, George Miller. We need more of those in movies. And it isn't just that we got some really quotable lines, some great cars, some great chase scenes. What made this movie for me was that it's a legitimately good movie. And that's taking into account even the story, because I think the best action movies keep their plots simple. You want the audience to be hooked the whole way through. You don't want to lose them at any point. So it's not just an extended chase sequence. I mean, in a way it is, but that's what makes it work so well. On top of that, you can find other videos online that describe how he shot the action scenes in a way that you're never lost as far as where everything is, which is a big problem I have with a lot of modern day action films. Filmmakers today love to take the camera, kind of zoom in and move the camera like this and do a lot of cuts because it's easier to fake action like that and you don't have to have your stunt guys do a whole lot then. Whereas movies like Jackie Chan movies know to hold the camera back and let the action play because you don't ever want to be confused. You want to be able to see what's going on in front of you. And Mad Max Fury Road does a lot of quick camera moves and a lot of quick cuts, but you always feel like you know where you are at any given moment. You know where the players are, you know where the cars are, and you're never confused because of the way he frames objects up and moves from one shot to the next shot. Tries to keep the action centered. So it's just such a well put together movie on so many levels that it was one of the most enjoyable movies of this year. Like Big Game, it's the sort of movie that I can watch over and over again and just have a blast every time. And I know that I'm watching a genuinely well-made, well-thought-out, good movie. And that's it. So, that's my pick. There are a lot of movies I missed this year that, who knows, maybe would have made the list if I had a chance. I haven't seen The Hateful Eight yet. Maybe I'll enjoy that a lot. Haven't seen The Revenant yet, which I'm really wishing I had a chance to see that before I made this video. But yeah, check out this video down below. You can see Nate's top 10 picks from 2015. He's worked with us on a lot of videos this year, and he has a much more varied list than mine is. By varied, I mean he has a lot of different movies than mine does. And check out this other video if you want to see what our favorite movies from 2014 were last year, where Nate and I had a conversation together. So, yeah.